Yes, I know, but we didn't.
Yeah,
We didn't
sit
talk
there
about
and
any
poke
other
a stick
type of-
at me so that I
Doing it
go.
the whole year.
Get him, Christine, get him.
Yeah.
You had time as well?
Oh, good, I'm not vice chair either.
Oh, on the other,
Just
yeah.
wanted to double check.
On which one? But really,
I don't know, I'm vice chair of something.
really, you're on a,
God forbid they should appoint me as chair of anything, being a female.
you know, I mean, you're screwed.
What are you gonna do?
On up.
No, really.
Carrying the things around.
I'm sorry.
A lot of people ask me for the cell number, and I give it to them, but I don't.
I do it for free. He charges $5.
That's not the way it is.
Texting, I don't even know what that is. So if I answer,
Get it?
you're the
You guys
best.
all
If
set?
I don't,
You would be incorrect.
Why do they get all this paper? I already have this in digital.
Yes, because you have one of those and I
She
don't.
can, they don't know
Who
the
has
difference.
one of those and I don't?
Paper on my desk.
That's probably best if you don't.
We are.
Just to shut me up.
But I have to figure out who
Did I hear a
else
second
will
on that
use
motion?
Fred, how's
Is that a
There a
motion?
motion over there to shut her up, and I was wondering if there was a second. You know? Where's the snare drum when you need it?
Is that a motion? I'm sorry, I really enjoyed that.
1 minute. How we doing?
Yeah. Sure, the Nate's talked to me, Larry's talked to me, I've already penciled it in on mine.
Is that a motion? Leave it to Sonny.
You got the main man and next to me.
Well, it's too wet to go home to Kingsley anyway.
That's all right.
Yeah, so? Do you think you not having supper impresses me? I don't
He
think
and I had a
so.
conversation yesterday. It didn't go well.
We're in the same boat. You would have thought you had brought a pizza or something.
You know, I was in my office at 6:30 this morning, the phone started ringing at 20 minutes to 7. I says, come on, guys, I don't even open till 8 o'clock.
You're not older than Ellen?
We're gonna get started in
You're
about
not.
1 minute.
Good, Melanie.
I
I hear you. Okay.
Dennis, do we know if Herb was coming?
Herb is not going to be here tonight or next week. He's excused.
Oh, that's right. So we'll
He's on
just list him as
vacation.
excused.
How does he rate?
He's on
Kinda like
vacation.
you.
His wife told him he's going on
Yeah, but
vacation.
he was on vacation earlier.
I know, but his wife told him he's going on more
Must think
vacations.
he's retired or something.
He took, your swing, you know?
I had a birthday last week. I'm almost half Herb's age.
Almost
used to be able to
half
say
Herb's
that.
age.
I used to be able to say that.
Meeting of the Grand Turk County Public Health and Safety Committee. We'll start by rising for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bonnie, will you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Gilman,
Here.
Inman,
Here.
Henschel,
Here.
Richardson,
Here.
Thomas.
Yep.
Max Bauer.
Here,
Fleece,
Present.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am. And Commissioner Limcool is excused, as we understand his wife made him go on vacations.
Under duress.
The next item is the approval of the minutes of October 5th.
Approved as presented.
Support. Motion by Inman, supported by Gilman. Further discussion, please?
I'd like roll call vote, please.
Okay?
Inman,
Yes.
Henschel,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Thomas,
Yep.
Max Bauer.
yes.
Fleece,
Abstain.
Gilman,
Yes.
Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am. For those in the audience, the reason Commissioner Fleece asked for a roll call vote, he was not here at that meeting, and therefore he can't approve the minutes for that meeting, so he would abstain from voting. This brings us to the first opportunity for public comment. Bonnie will read the rules for public comment. There's a second opportunity for public comment later in the meeting, and during the course of the discussion of business, if someone wants to make public comment on a specific issue on the agenda, we will allow that also.
Any person shall be permitted to address a meeting of the Board of Commissioners, which is required to be open to the public under the provision of the Michigan Open Meetings Act as amended. Public comment shall be carried out in accordance with the following board rules and procedures. Any person wishing to address the board shall state his or her name and address. No person shall be allowed to speak more than once on the same matter, excluding time needed to answer commissioners' questions. The chairperson shall control the amount of time each person shall be allowed to speak, which shall not exceed 3 minutes. Chairperson may, at his or her discretion, extend the amount of time any person is allowed to speak.
Having heard the rules for public comment, is anyone wishing to speak at this time? Would the clerk like to speak? Doesn't sound like she's doing it very well.
I think I'm losing my voice. I'm
All right,
sorry.
seeing none, we will move forward with the agenda. The approval of the agenda, I do have one item to add. The undersheriff came on bended knee asking to add a CPO update under unfinished business. So we will add that to the
On
agenda.
bended knee?
Commissioner Gilman?
On the consent calendar, you have C, which is action and items removed from the consent calendar, except it's under the consent calendar. Should that not be moved to its own number, perhaps number 8, and then move the others down?
I think you're probably right.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
You're right.
Okay.
You can make it easy, don't pull anything off.
Okay, any other additions or deletions from the agenda? Well, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Sure.
Motion by Thomas, supported by Fleece, to approve the agenda as provided with the amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. This brings us, we have no special orders of business this evening, so this brings us to the consent calendar. Bonnie, if you could read the consent calendar, please.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file, or approval is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. Commission on Aging monthly program reports. A, in-home services. B, senior center services. C, story of the month. D, Commission on Aging board and committee meeting minutes for October. Number 2, community corrections report for September. Number 3, Veteran Services monthly activity through September 2011 and minutes of September 15th. B, approve. Number 1, Commission on Aging 2012 sliding fee scale. Number 2, Sheriff's Office Jail Inmate Program Treatment Services Contract Renewal. Number 3, Sheriff's Office Burn Grant Assistance Grant for TNT acceptance. Number 4, Health Department Traverse Health Clinic and Coalition Contract Renewal. Number 5, Dental Services Agreement Amendment Number 14.
Having heard for the consent calendar, is there any item that the audience wishes to have removed? Seeing none, any item the commissioners wish to have? Chris?
B2, please.
Okay. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item B2.
So moved.
Motion by Inman, supported by Gilman. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Henschel,
Yes.
Richardson,
Yes.
Thomas.
Yep.
Maxbauer.
Yes.
Fleece,
Yes.
Gilman,
Yes.
Inman, Wheelock.
Yes, ma'am. Let's take care of the issue that was removed from the consent calendar, the Grand Terrace Sheriff's Office Jail Inmate Program Treatment Services Contract. Chris, you asked to have this pulled?
I did. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not seeing a copy of the contract in here, and what concerns me is Commissioner Henschel has done a great deal of review recently with community mental health, and I'm not seeing a contract in here. I don't know what, if any, services are being duplicated, and I'm hesitant to approve a contract without reading it.
Captain Hall's not here, Lieutenant Monroe is. Maybe he or the undersheriff can shed some light onto this thing?
I don't want to pay twice.
Don't blame you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Lieutenant Monroe, Assistant Jail Administrator. This particular contract, what we're talking about here is jail services programs for the inmates. Excuse me, i.e. life skills, anger management, that type of thing, is totally separate from community mental health.
It's also substance abuse.
Substance abuse.
Education.
Yes, absolutely.
Dennis, why isn't there a contract in here?
Well, we have not been putting the contracts in the board's agendas. We've had that understanding that if a commissioner wants a copy of the contract, they just call us. I mean, Commissioner Henschel actually called us on this, and we emailed it out. But I think there was a time where we were putting contracts in every board agenda, and then the board said, let's back off of that.
I remember that.
So I can tell you, though, because of Commissioner Henschel's review of this, this is really a renewal of the contract. I believe everything is the same, essentially the same, with the exception of changing dates and extension of the contract, I believe, Buck. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
So we've been with these folks for quite a while. They do good work for us, but, we can certainly put all the contracts in the agendas if you like. but
No,
it's a lot.
that's all right. I should have asked ahead of time.
And I believe, if my memory is correct, these services are available to basically all of the prisoners that are in our jail,
That is
correct?
correct.
Yep.
And the only question I had is, I know this was bid, but I don't know whether the other respondents actually created a price. We sent it out, correct? We sent it out for,
We did. We sent out an RFP. We had 3 different providers respond.
Right.
Dr. Hexum with Nexus is the one that we went with based on, we had an evaluation team evaluate all 3 providers. His program at this point provided more services than the others. One is more of a faith-based program. That one was a free one. I mean, there was no price attached to that. However, it is faith-based, and we have to keep division of church and state for the inmates as well. So we are looking at providing a time slot for that particular provider to come in for those who are interested in faith-based program. And we'll provide a time slot for that. But beyond that, Dr. Hexum and his program with Nexus is the one that we went with.
Buck, which organization offers the faith-based program?
Project Unity for Life, I believe, is the title for it.
Project Unity for Life.
Yes, that's it.
well, I think Nexus organization has been with us probably close to 10 years.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've ever had any concerns about the quality of the service. And
None whatsoever.
the fact that this price hasn't increased for at least 4 or 5 years, too, doesn't lend
Been the
well
same for
to
the
continue.
Right, the last 6 years that I'm aware of.
6 years. Ross?
I'd like to make a motion that we renew the contract with Nexus Family Services for a period of 3 years, beginning January 1st, 2012, and ending December 31st, 2014.
Support.
Motion by Richardson, supported by Thomas to approve the contract. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Buck.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just for Dennis, do you think it'd be possible then, when we have the contracts available, instead of, putting them with the PACs necessarily, at least making them available to us, at least in some electronic form?
Yep. And I'm going to check with staff. I know we always had them available on the website that they could be reviewed. But you know what I'll try to do is we'll try to move them so that they're in the same area as the agendas on the website. And then that way you can go and look at them.
That'd be
Anything.
excellent. Thank you.
I'll be glad to do that.
Anything else in regard to the consent calendar? Department action items. Health Services Building.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to keep this brief. Fred Kiesler and Jerry Pugh and Dean Bott are here as well. I hope you all saw my email. We worked on this until this afternoon. This has been very difficult, and we're finding it very hard to find an option that is financially viable. We have come up with one option this afternoon. We are not prepared to show you the full analysis. We just don't have it done. But we believe we've come up with one thing that could work. And so the purpose of tonight was to give you a verbal update on where we're going with this, to see if you have any interest in it at all. If you don't, we'll just discontinue this. If you do, we would put the full analysis together for next week's meeting and try to have you in a position to have some action next week. So now, with Dean at my back I'm going to try to give you...
He's getting closer.
I'm going to give you a summary, and please, you know me, I'm not going to get into specific numbers. It's generalities, but here's what we're talking about. After looking at all the options, we find one that we think is viable. Here's the problem. We are going to collect in rent in the new building, we estimate around $340,000, okay? We're trying to do a bond issue that would be as short as possible. If you go we're looking at 15 years, okay? If you go to 20 years, it costs us an extra $800,000 in interest. If you go to 25 years, it costs us about $1.8 million in interest additionally from 15 years. So we wanted to try to keep it short. But here's the problem. When we collect more rent from the health department, the way our indirect cost system is set up, it means it will impact our indirect costs, and it will mean about a net $170,000 less for the general fund. That's the problem. They will raise close to enough rent, even at 15 years, to pay the bond issue, but there's a hole of $170,000 in the general fund. And that's the problem we've struggled with, and we've looked at every option we possibly could. Here's what we finally came up with today, and this is Dean, Bill Rokas, and myself. We have Woodmere bonds that are about 5 years left on them. That's the Sheriff City Police building. We have Hall of Justice bonds that have more like 14 years left on them. And that's our big expense. That's really our last expense other than the septic treatment plant. It's the last county debt, and they have about 14 years. We believe, and we've talked with John Axe about this, we believe that we could take, they're both up for recall, or where we could buy them, not refinance them, buy them next May. We're proposing that we use tax delinquent money and we buy those two bonds. That will save we estimate a net savings of $351,000 a year. And then spread those two out collectively over the next 15 years, along with this new debt. And if we did that, we would have enough money to pay that and fill the hole with the general fund. Okay. So it would be restructuring our debt, but what that would mean is then next year we would borrow for the tax delinquent. And Bill has built that number of the interest, which we think will be about 1%. Bill has built that number into this analysis. And we think that is the one way that we can come up with that we can do this and fund. So we'd buy those bonds back, which would save us $350-some thousand, we think, annually. And that would bring us in enough net savings so there's no cost to the general fund, and we'd be able to do this bond issue over 15 years. And then we'd restructure those other two bond issues to go the same way. So that's the one option we've come up with. It's the only option that we've come up with. I asked Bill this question, and here's what Bill wanted me to convey to you. This is only a good decision to move forward if you really feel you need to build a health building. Okay? It will not jeopardize us financially, we don't believe. We've gone through a lot of due diligence on this. We're not concerned. This will not impact the way Moody's or Standard & Poor's looks at our tax delinquent fund, because it still has the same fund balance.
Right, it doesn't reduce our fund balance.
It doesn't reduce the fund balance. It's a borrow. And so we're okay that way. We don't think it'll have a huge financial impact on us. And that's a way we could restructure these bonds. So that's just it in general terms. If you want us to move forward with the full analysis, we would bring you back next week all of the current bonds, along with the bond schedules. We would put the new proposed bond schedule together. And the reason we can do this is because if we loan it to ourselves and buy those bonds, we're getting 0.5%, 0.25% interest. We can make those loans to us at less than half of what we're paying on the bond market, and we're making twice as much money on our interest, if you understand what I'm saying, because we're paying this 3% and 4%. So that's how we come to a net savings of $350,000. John Axe's response was, that's very unique, and I think it works. I don't know if it's been done like this anyplace, but he feels it's completely legal and we could do this. and then we kind of take the fate of those two buildings in our own hands, and over the next 15 years, we make roughly the same payments. We actually think there'll be a little net savings. Now, this also includes, I should have added, I'm sorry, this only works if the health department gives us $500,000 of their fund balance towards the cost of the building, which they have agreed to do, okay? That still leaves them with a fund balance in excess of $1 million. So they've agreed to do that. It also does not take into account the sale of the building.
Right.
Okay, and the sale of the building, I went and got a quote from an appraiser. I know commissioners have said $500,000, $750,000. I don't know what that building's worth. I went to an appraiser, it's $3,700 to get an appraisal done, so our tax people down in the equalization department are going to give us a rough number of what that is. But if this doesn't assume we get anything from that building. But if we do sell it, when we do sell it, then what we would do is pay this down early to bill in the tax delinquent fund. That would be the idea there. So that's the only thing we've come up with, and I can tell you, and Dean I'm sure would tell you, we probably looked at 25 different options. We analyzed these things up and down. It's the only one that we think has any viability to work for us. And now the good points about it is, it's 15 years. The bad point about it is, we're going to go borrow on the tax delinquent fund, and we probably have to do that for several years. Within a month of borrowing, Bill will probably have, if we borrow $7 million, Bill will probably have $6 million back within a couple of months from the taxes that are returned. So it isn't like it's going to sit out there. These are going to be one-year anticipation warrants is how they'll be done. And he thinks that the interest rate, at least initially, would be 1 year. The problem is, the real unknown here is, what are interest rates going to look like 10, 15 years down the road? On the one hand, we're going to be loaning the money to ourselves at 1 or 2%, so we're going to be saving on the loan. On the other hand, if interest rates go up to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8%, we're losing the potential for investing at a higher rate of interest because we're tying this money up for this period of time. The other thing I want to tell you is, if this money is moved to do this, it's moved to the general fund balance, but it's under the law, it is committed money, so it can't be used. You can't use it to fund budgets or anything else. It can only be used for this purpose. So that's, in a nutshell, what I can tell you at this point. I mean, if you have any general questions, Dean and I would try to answer them. I think Dean and I think our guidance to you would be, if you believe this health department building is a good thing to do, then this works.
I guess I have a question. Looking at the pros and cons of an extended term, I mean, generally in the commercial loan business, when you look at a new building, it goes anywhere from 20, the banks will loan up to 25 years, and if it's a couple years old, they'll go up to 20 years.
In the government sector, they'll go up to 35 years on a building like this.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering the cash flow difference on a 25-year amortization or a 20-year amortization, and what the differential is. And then, because I know you haven't done the analysis, but what I'm saying is when you come back and do the analysis, can you give us the differential on the terms?
We've done the analysis, and we can give you that. I can tell you it still puts, it's between $100,000 and a $70,000 hole, roughly, by going out to 25 years, and you're spending another $1.8 million in interest. So we've analyzed, we even looked at overlaying borrowing $4 million on the market, and loaning ourselves the other $1 million internally, and delaying the principal payment on that extra $1 million till 2018 when the Woodmere building is paid off, and use the money that's going towards Woodmere to pay it off. But financially, none of them work to balance out the loss to the general fund that we've come up with in 20 or 25 scenarios, except this one.
What is the rate on the 15, 20, 25-year bond if we went out to market today?
Now, they go on a 20-year, just on average, they start at 2% and go out to 4%.
Fixed or variable?
Variable. They're set, but each year is set. They'll start at 2% in the first year, and they'll go up to 4% in the 15th or 20th year. But what we're talking about is, because we're loaning to ourselves, half of that or less.
Ross?
Dennis, do you know roughly how much money we owe on the Woodmere building and the Hall of Justice?
$1,600,000 roughly, right?
A little less than that. 1.5.
1.5. Told you I'm not exact.
Total on both buildings?
No, Woodmere.
Oh, Woodmere, okay.
Yeah.
And what's the Hall of Justice?
Give me just a second.
6.5.
Correct, that one is correct.
6.5?
Yeah.
Yes.
So what you're talking about then is taking that $8 million and paying it off and then financing it over 15 years.
To ourselves.
To ourselves.
Yes.
Interesting.
And that will take away all of, really, that takes away all of our commercial borrows that we have, with the exception of the septic treatment plant, which we jointly have with the township. So we would have no more outstanding loans on the market. It would all be
Then-
internal.
The fund balance for the delinquent tax fund is at 9 million?
12.4.
12 million?
Yeah.
So that'd leave
What
about
we
4
spend, you're thinking, I think what you're thinking, Commissioner, is we spend between, we have to pay out between 9 and 10 for
We would have to borrow.
delinquencies. Yeah, we'd have
If we
to borrow.
got 4 million in there, or 3
Well, we're going
million.
to have, Bill estimates that we'll have around 2 million left over if we do this borrow, so we'd probably have to borrow about 7. And that will, the roughly interest cost on that is about $100,000 next year. And that's included in the analysis.
Okay.
I've really been all for anything we can do to improve our health department, but if we're going to go to the extent of borrowing from our tax delinquent fund, I'd rather, and I haven't talked to anybody, but just off the top of my head, I'd really rather see us loan it to ourselves and make the septic treatment plant a county facility and prevent a civil war with our townships.
Well, there's a new update on that right now.
Chris?
Well, you all know I'm basically the Lone Ranger here. I would like to drive a Mercedes. I'd like to wear Jimmy Choo shoes, and I would like to wear Cole Haan leather. I don't. You know, at a certain point in time, you have to say, what can you afford? And what I don't want to risk or jeopardize, and I understand that the administrator and Dean are being conservative and cautious and trying to, and protecting the general fund. But honestly, you know, with times such as they are, I'm more inclined to do what we can afford. And in my opinion, this isn't it.
Well, and let me just add to that, to have the full, transparency of this issue. Bill wants to do this anyway. And so the other side of the coin, going along with what Commissioner Maxbauer says, is if we don't build the building and we do this, that's going to be $350,000 that's freed up in the general fund.
Jobs, folks.
So just so you're aware. Larry?
Well, Dennis, in the scenario of we do nothing, other than the minimum repairs to the current building in Garfield, I mean, I'm not all in favor of dumping a whole lot of money in that Garfield building or expanding it or those kinds of things. I mean, if we left it in its current structure and put the new roof on and did whatever was necessary for, the windows or whatever, just the clients are just going to have to wait longer to get served in the dental clinic, and then we just leave everything as is. I mean, that is another option.
Absolutely is. In fact, I would suggest to you that at this point in time, that's a better option than investing more money in the current facility. I don't think I would recommend to you to put more money into the Garfield facility, other than things that we absolutely have to do so the roof's not leaking and those kinds of things, and so that the employees and patients can have, be comfortable in that building. That's all I would suggest you do. Larry?
Dennis, do you need a consensus of the board to continue your analysis or a motion?
That's what I would ask, is if the board, all I want to know tonight is, do you want us to continue to explore this and bring you a full analysis next week, where we'd show that to you, and if you decide it works, then we'd ask you to approve the contractor and get started, or tell us, just don't spend any more time on it.
Well, I think it's prudent that you can continue the analysis and report back to us next week, so we kind of have the whole picture, if you will.
Jason?
Yeah, I tend to agree with Commissioner Fleece that I think it is prudent that we do look at the whole picture, but I will say that I'm even while looking at the new building as an investment, in the future, if there's an option of just doing nothing as well, we might have to consider that for the time being. Things aren't going so well, I mean, in terms of tax revenue, and we have to sometimes take those things into consideration.
One thing let me add if I could, please. We are going to have to deal with, if we decide not to move forward, which is perfectly fine, we will bring you next week if you tell us to continue on, the immediate things we have to do to the building.
That's what I was
So
gonna
you
ask
have some
about.
sense of that as well. I think it's important for you to know. And we are going to have to work with the health department to figure out how they cost this $210,000 that they've spent roughly on designs for the new building, because, they kind of fronted that for us to do this design on a brand-new building at the board's direction, and that's a $200,000 hole that we're going to have to kind of figure out how they can,
Well, they got the fund
how they
balance
can,
right now.
how they can budget that.
Yeah, I mean, they have the fund balance.
Well, they have a fund balance, but I don't know if it's, we have to figure out the appropriate way that that's spent for
I
that.
see.
Well, you can put me down with Commissioner Fleece on, let's explore, keep exploring, so we have a better picture of it all. But I still have a couple more questions. So you're talking about spending $8 million of the tax revolving fund to pay off the existing bonds. So then
Roughly, yeah.
then the new building would be bonds you'd purchase on the open market.
That's all under exploration, really, at this point. We're not sure if we would try to do the internal financing or go to the market for some of the debt.
Because there's not enough in the tax revolving fund to do both.
There's not.
But on the other hand, could you take $6 million out of the tax revolving fund to pay for the new building and leave the other two where they are?
Well, we looked at that as well, but the point is, it's really hard to turn our heads on the potential savings of $350,000 a year, regardless of whether we build that or not. But I would say it the other way, Commissioner, if Bill, if we have 12 million in there, Bill might say, well, let's only borrow 3, instead of 5, because that's what we're talking about, is borrowing 5. Let's borrow 3 and let's just loan the other 2 internally with ourselves and take 10 out of the tax delinquency. Still leaves the 2, roughly 2 to go ahead and move forward with the new next year's tax delinquent issue, and we could cut that rate, by doing that other 2. We're still in the discussion of that.
So what you're saying is you can basically slice it or dice it a number of different ways.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's exactly. And what we would do is try to slice it in the way that maximizes the benefit to the county.
Well, I guess, I have a couple of comments. One, I certainly would like to see the rest of the analysis, But I think one of the things that we can't fail to look at is 3 years ago or better, we heard from the health director that he needed space. And we've played the game for basically 3 years, almost 4 years, 3.5 years now, of whether we were going to put an addition on the existing building. They're bulging at the seams, the demand for services is higher, Dental Clinics North is willing to pay for, at the point that we were looking at just the addition, the contract to them alone was going to make the bond payment. We're still fairly close to that. But the fact is, we can talk all we want about, whether we need to be, or whether we want to spend the money or not. But the fact is, we're not adequately meeting the needs of the health department right now. So we can have all the discussion we want about not wanting to spend the money, but then we better have a discussion about how we're going to meet the needs of the health department, because we're not doing it right now. Well, and that's, from that perspective, I certainly would like to see the rest of it, and we can go back and have more discussions about a remodel. I will never support remodeling that existing building. It just doesn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense a year and a half ago when we were having the discussion, and it still doesn't.
Well, frankly,
and when we found the difference between a new turnkey operation and the remodel, it really didn't make sense.
Yeah, frankly, the only reason that we brought a remodel to you was because...
Something we could afford.
That's exactly right, so...
Rob?
I'd like to see analysis in writing with the 15, 20, 25, 30, 35-year, and I'd like to see in that analysis adjustments for inflation based on historical long-term inflation.
Larry?
You're like a step ahead of me. I mean, the one question I had is I wanted to compare what, if we did nothing, what we would have to put into the building to, to keep it functional. I still struggle a little bit with, it'd be great to have the health department and the dental clinic together, all right? But, if Dental North thinks they can come up with $340,000 by getting into a certain size building, I mean, they always have the option to go out to the market and finding a building that meets their needs. They can put their own capital in, and they can set up their own lease arrangement, and we can just put what's necessary in that building to keep their health department functioning, and we're moving on with life. I mean, there are other options, for Dental Clinics North.
Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. And that is absolutely a choice that they can make. You just need to be aware that there's a synergy to having them together. You all recognize that. But there will also be a hole in the budget if they leave, because they currently pay us rent. So that rent's going to be lost, and that's something that we're going to have to make up in some other way. So it impacts us either way, but certainly that is a viable option.
And we have a contract with them in place, and I don't remember how long that contract goes.
That contract, I think, can be, they would be basically voiding the contract or asking us to let them out of the contract if they move to another space. So I'm not concerned about that. That's workable.
Larry?
Well, Commissioner Inderman, I have to agree with Chairman Wheelock. We are not adequately even beginning to meet the health department's needs now, and the reason for the initial talk, in case your memory is dimmed, of the expansion or remodeling was to put an addition onto that building so we could add, 6 dental chairs or 9?
No, we're adding 3 or 4. How many?
9 to 12.
9 to 12.
9 to 12. And that's not too important unless you're the person with the toothache and you don't have an alternative. And to put money, I agree with Wheelock completely. To put money in that old building, the voters ought to throw us out of office.
Yeah.
So I think we need to listen to what their analysis is next week and go from there.
Just as a follow-up, I'm in favor of doing the analysis and doing the review of what it would take to upgrade it and taking a look at the full option. But I guess I could stand here and make a case that there are other parts of county government that we're not adequately serving as well. And to pick out the health department and saying we're not adequately servicing the health department, I don't think is a fair way of reviewing the necessity of pointing out just to the health department. I mean, we have an aged facility. We have an aged facility in terms of the county jail and its future needs on that issue. I mean, obviously we've downsized departments to the bare minimum in terms of staffing levels. I mean, you could make the argument back and forth about the adequacy of county government, its programs, its services, and its facilities. So, it's all where you want to make, the political decision about how you want to spend that money.
Well, but, I understand that, but with all due respect, that's exactly what we did when we built a new court building. That's exactly what we did when we built a sheriff's and city police building. That's exactly what we did when we remodeled the courthouse. We've done it time and time and time again. So I'm just saying, this is kind of how we've done it. And, but if we did a needs analysis of all of our buildings, right now, there's 2 main ones, that need work, and that's Front Street, and that's this building. But you are correct, but I think it's important for all the commissioners to understand, this is not any different than how we've done every other building. The only difference now is the economy's not as good. And that's a serious difference.
Well, one of the best reasons to go ahead now, and I don't know that we should yet or not, but a good reason to go ahead is because of the economy is bad, and we probably got lower prices on that building than we would ever get in 5 years if things start picking up. So it's good. Interest rates and and the cost of the building, it might be in our favor, go ahead, even if we get our necks stuck out a little bit.
Yeah, I think they certainly are. There's no question.
And the other thing is it'll create a bunch of jobs in the neighborhood. We need them too.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
No.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we direct staff to move forward with the analysis of the health services building, dental clinics north combination on Lafreniere Road in terms of the financial plan and an analysis also as on the current needs of the current building on Garfield Road.
Support.
Okay, motion by Inman, supported by Thomas. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same?
Aye.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Maxbauer?
No.
Fleece?
Yes.
Gilman?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes.
Henschel?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am. Motion carried. Dennis, Dean, you have any other questions in this regard?
No, thank you.
Okay, and I'm sure Jerry will contribute anything he can back there in the corner, so. All right, this brings us to potential items as far as the consideration of the alternates. I guess we probably should still have the discussion about those items because it will make a difference in what we talk about for the total financial package of construction of this building, correct?
Yeah, you can do that now, or you can do it next week, whatever you prefer. I don't know, it's really up to you. I don't know, well, it's your choice.
Well, Ray's here, you know,
Sure.
if everyone's
Yeah.
comfortable, let's go ahead and put it, we posted it on the agenda that we'd have the discussion, so. Your turn. As we all remember, basically, we had 4 alternates that we truly talked about. 2 of them on page 25 in our letter, in our packet, are being recommended, that being the carport structure and the aluminum door frames on the inside of the building. I don't know that we had any real questions about that. The other 2 alternates, the metal roof and the geothermal heating, I guess we're open for discussion in those regards. So, Ray, do you want to start and tell us where you've left off? Or?
Dennis had requested, Ray Kendra, CWS Architects. Dennis requested last week that we put together a sort of a formal recommendation letter, which is dated October 27th, which I believe is in their packet. So what we did is we went back and looked specifically at the geothermal, because I think there was a big question there as to how to approach that in terms of a pump and dump system, or what was done at Front Street project and some of the other projects in town. Having done that, the engineer who actually designed some of those projects still was making the recommendation that we stick with the base bid, which is a boiler and heat pump sort of system as opposed to the geothermal because of the payback. So that's what we recommended. That's what we indicated in this letter. It's certainly a viable system, and we would look at a pump and dump or some other configuration of that system, but we suggested that we still use the figure of $141,500, understanding that there may be some savings, but it wasn't going to be 50%, it wasn't going to be substantial, that we're still going to be paying premium for that system without potentially the payback. So that was alternate number 3. And then the metal roof, the contractor did come back with a voluntary alternate to say if we used a little bit different system, we could save, I believe it was in the neighborhood of $25,000 from what they had put on their initial form. So it'd be a different manufacturer, a little different system. It actually had a higher warranty than the base bid system, or the base bid alternate system had. But again, we're looking at $169,893 with, it is a more durable system, but could we justify that as having a payback? Not necessarily, so we really would leave that decision up to the board again if they wanted to pursue or felt strongly about a metal roof. So those were the 2 that were the major ones. And then the third one was that alternate for the sidewalk, which was $11,000. And that was relatively minor in comparison to the other 2 items we just discussed. But again, we don't feel that it was necessarily something that needed to be done immediately. It's our understanding that there's going to be some work potentially happening on Lafreniere Road, and so it might be at a later date when they kind of have a master plan for what they're doing, that work or those sidewalks may be installed as part of a bigger project.
You know, and Ray, I just got a letter today from the traffic engineer. Is that what it was, Commissioner? For the road commission. And they indicated, and I don't know if you've seen this letter, but they've indicated that another option for us, you know, that cost was pretty expensive from for road commission work. They indicated that we could reduce that cost significantly if we decided to change the entrance and use the existing entrance where we go into our public service building and enter through that entrance and not build another entrance on Lafreniere.
Okay.
And you check
I'm
and
not
see if
aware
you
of
got
that,
it. If
no.
you haven't, I'll get you that letter, because that would, I think that could save us, you know, a good chunk of that money that was budgeted there for.
Yeah, but getting
road
through that
access.
parking lot's a pain in the tail.
Well, it would have to be reconstructed.
You know, that whole parking lot would all have to be reconfigured too, because
Right.
when you come in on that side road and then enter into the end of the parking lot, and then you immediately have to go kind of round and bounce because of the spread. By the time you get down past the carport that's existing down to the other end of the property, you're going to have more money in it than it would take to put the entrance.
Oh,
I
what
believe the road commission's estimate was significantly higher than it should have
Yeah.
been for the cost to put that driveway in anyway. And that's
Well-
a discussion that I've had with a couple road commissioners, and I'm sure that we will see different numbers before construction actually takes place. Larry?
I agree with you, but I think last week, Dennis, wasn't it, didn't you name a bunch of spots, or maybe it was Ray, that projects similar to this where the road commission hadn't required anything?
I think Ray did.
That was our engineer. The engineer who was on our team actually indicated those spots.
Well, I had the pleasure of speaking with the road commission chairman here earlier this week, and I mentioned that to him about this exorbitant cost, and he wasn't aware of it at all at a board level. So I think perhaps that's just a little premature, the estimates, you know, and I don't know that the board, the road commission at the board level would in fact enforce that.
I don't think they were, from the discussions that I've had, I don't believe the road commission at the executive level were aware of the numbers that we were given.
Correct.
I kind of think, I don't want anyone to get the impression that that's unusual.
No.
You know, I mean, they set a set of guidelines, and that's how they give those numbers out every day to developers of every project. So I think in almost all cases, the board members don't know those numbers until the deal gets put together,
Well,
so.
the developers didn't lend them $4 million either, and finance trucks and all those kind of things either, so. I mentioned that along the way.
And I guess I wasn't aware of that driveway idea. The only concern I'd have right off the bat would be the number of trips to that new building would be, I think, substantially greater than the number of trips that are happening to the existing building. So I think that we'd be funneling a great deal of traffic through that parking lot, and I guess I'd have some concern about that piece of
Well,
it, so.
I think it's fair to say from all the comments that that is still an issue that's undecided, and there may be considerable savings as a result of it if we decide to go forward.
Rob?
Commissioner Lemkool is watching, and he has indicated via text message that he's in favor of eliminating the carport structure.
Yeah, really.
You can tell Commissioner Inman that Lemkool, that it's very important that we go with a steel roof. To me, alternate two shouldn't even be an alternative, because there's just no comparison between the two. Steel roof is, and I see the other one is aluminum, but still, compared to a shingle roof, they're just not making good shingles anymore particularly compared to what they're charging for them.
Didn't you indicate that the shingle roof has a longer life?
No, it don't.
The warranties are different. In the warranty on a shingled roof is a prorated warranty, and the surface, the first warranty shows as a longer warranty, but it prorates down as the life of the roof goes on. I think the thing that we try to do when we're doing green buildings and doing buildings in general is we're looking at life cycle costs for our clients, and everything that we've done in this building has a very good life cycle cost. And I will say that a metal roof would be more or less susceptible to wind damage and some of the other things that we might see with a shingle roof. So it's more durable. I mean, and there's a little bit of costs that go along with it. I mean, metal would be more durable than asphalt, but there's a cost there. And we're just trying to make recommendations based on best cost. And so that one's a hard decision. And in some cases, it may not be a hard decision, but we would like you to make that decision on the metal roof, is all we would like to do.
I have a neighbor that's just replacing when I built the house, was the best shingles they could buy, and they're not 20 years old. He's just replacing it with steel.
There's pros and cons to both shingles and to steel. The one thing that, in my mind makes me lean toward the steel is because of the size of this building. Snow load on this building with shingles is going to be significantly higher than it will be with metal. Because the metal will shed the snow and the ice.
And it doesn't weigh as much as the shingles.
No, it doesn't weigh as much to construct it. But the fact is, you're going to look at a significant snow load increase if you go to asphalt shingles compared to going with, well, they're not asphalt anymore, they're almost all fiberglass. But the point is, a shingled roof, you're going to have probably at least 20% more, if not 30% more snow loading on that structure than you're going to have if you go to the metal roof.
It will hold more snow without a doubt. I mean, the metal roof will shed snow much quicker than a shingle roof will.
This is a large building, guys. It's a large building. The one concern that I have on it is the pitch on it. I didn't get down to the details to notice what the pitch of the roof is, but usually when we get buildings this big, they don't make the roofs as steep, because otherwise it looks like you got more roof than you got building. And the problem is when you do a shingled roof and you don't make them as steep, you have even more problems with snow loading.
It's a 412 roof, which matches the existing, or the other building that's adjacent, and that building, of course, has a metal roof on it, so.
But if you get less than 412, it doesn't slide off of steel very well either.
So,
Rob?
We can't let Fred off the hook completely here tonight. At the community collaborative meeting, one of the things somebody mentioned, we were discussing, kind of doing a needs analysis of unmet needs, and one of the things they mentioned under transportation was access to pharmacies. So I just, kind of a curveball to throw out there, might one option be, Dennis, to have space that we would rent out to a pharmacy and help make the payment?
I think that's an option. I don't think the building was sized for that, but that certainly would be an option. It's one that we had not explored.
and we did show an addition, I mean, we showed space for an addition, and that might be a use that could fill that space.
Most of those type of pharmacies don't take very much room because they have the medication delivered from another central facility. Chris?
Well, my pharmacy delivers prescriptions for free. And so, all you have to do...
There's one on every corner. There's a pharmacy on every corner.
I know.
Right now.
More coming.
And
Maybe people don't know about it.
Ross?
Just to maybe get some forward progress here, Ray, you do not think the geothermal heating is worth the expense?
The engineers did a cost analysis or an energy model, and because of the efficiency of the installation, and we have to be very clear that the base bid system is a very high efficiency system to begin with, and that was where we were at, is that when they ran those energy models, they were, I think, a little bit surprised. They thought there was going to be a sooner payback in the neighborhood of 5 to 7 years. And once they ran the energy models, they realized that payback wasn't there. So I think they were taken a bit by surprise because everybody expects that the geothermal, but they do have a very, very high efficiency system design. So it's not like we're going from forced air to geothermal. If we were doing forced air to geothermal, we would by all means be recommending geothermal, but that's not what we're doing here. So that was just part of the analysis that was done.
Well, then I'd like to make a motion that we abandon any further consideration of alternate number 3.
I have a motion. Do I have support? Motion by Richardson, supported by Thomas, to eliminate further discussion or further consideration of alternate number 3, the geothermal for the Health Department building. Further discussion? The one thing that I noted in something that I read, and I don't see it here right now, if we talk about a LEED certified building, we lose all of our water conservation points when we do geothermal.
If we did a
If we
pump
do
and
the
dump.
dump system.
If we did a pump and dump system, that was what that was.
You know, I have a comment on that or a question. How could you lose your water conservation on a pump and dump? You pump the water up, and you're pumping it right back down, and none of it's lost. So, what type of certification is this?
I think it's the fact that you're using water to cool it, and then, or to cool or heat, whatever the case might be, type of season, but then it's just being pumped back into it has to go somewhere, and in this case, they haven't figured out where they would put it. If it would go back into, we certainly wouldn't go into storm sewer, we're not going to put it into a wetland, or so it would be going into probably retention basins that would then, leach back into the soil, into the aquifer, but I think that that was the comment from the engineer, so I don't have the exact scientific backup, I guess, behind it, but my understanding is that the fact of the matter that you were using water on a continuous cycle, where the original system that we had bid is the closed loop system, you're just heating another fluid that's a carrier, and it's really not taking water and running it through the system, then putting it somewhere else. I think that was the issue that the point they were trying to make, is that with a pump and dump system, you're going to pull that water out, run it through the system, and then extract it to somewhere else. And that, yes, I think long-term it would run back into the aquifer and kind of replenish itself, but it wasn't a direct system.
Well, I find it simply amazing.
And
and I don't want to argue the point, but in Hershey, Pennsylvania, there's about a 40,000 square foot building, designed similar to what we're looking at here.
Right.
And it's a museum, 3 stories. And they've got one wall on the main floor when you walk in devoted to the explanation and the money they have saved with geothermal. And I just respectfully will have to disagree with some of these engineers and their analysis, because I have 3 of these systems myself, and I don't know of any other source. In fact, tonight, I intended to bring, and I forgot, the cost, a study that was done, it was published in the Cherryland magazine they published about 2 years ago, but it shows the cost of creating 100,000 BTUs of heat. For example, natural gas, $1.90. Propane, it was up around $3. Fuel oil was like $2.50. Geothermal was 32 cents. To me, that's significant. And I've been able to put them dollar bills in my pocket, in my home and my businesses. So,
and the engineer has.
But I'm not willing to argue the point. And I understand Ross's motion, but I'm going to vote no on it. So you'll need a roll call.
Well, I think the one thing is this building is designed with very high efficiency mechanicals.
Absolutely.
And we absolutely have to acknowledge that. Roll call, please, Bonnie.
Commissioner Thomas?
Yes.
Max Bauer?
No.
Fleece?
No.
Gilman?
No.
Inman?
No.
Henschel?
Yes.
Wheelock, or Richardson?
Yes.
Wheelock.
Yes. Motion passes.
No,
It
fails.
fails 4-4, right?
4-4. 4-4, so it doesn't.
Fails.
Fails.
Doesn't do anything.
Further,
So at this point,
Mr. Chairman,
anyway.
if I could a moment, I'd be glad to bring that article next week to the meeting when we discussed it, just to talk about it a little further, because, like I said, I really have a strong conviction for that, and if they can, Hershey, Pennsylvania the weather there isn't a whole lot different than here. And if they can have, and I walked in there to look at cars. I didn't walk in there to read about geothermal. But it really made an impression on me, and that is a beautiful, beautiful three-story building. And it's relatively new. They built it about 5 years ago. I just like to look into it a little further.
And I will invite Gary Nealis, who's the engineer, to be there at the next meeting so he can directly answer your questions, because he's the individual who's designed many of these systems. He's more knowledgeable on the specifics than I can be right now, so I'll make sure he's in attendance next week as well, so.
I'm not saying that the proposed system that you want to put in is not efficient.
Sure.
I'm just saying there's a more efficient method out
No,
there. And we're looking, I think we talked about a 50-year building.
Absolutely.
Is that what you're
Yeah,
saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. The alternates are here for consideration, the carport structure. Apparently Commissioner Lincool doesn't think we need the carport structure. Does anyone else have a comment in regard to that issue? Larry?
If I'm not mistaken, that was the $11,000.
$25,000.
Yeah. I think that's kind of an important feature. Number one, it's the county-owned vehicles, I understand, that'll be parked under that.
That's correct.
And just the protection from the weather and so forth, the elements, probably increases the longevity of a car to the point. Plus, if you're going to get in it and go, it's nice if it's not buried in snow.
Well, I guess my comment, I don't know if Fred has a comment. My thought in that regard was the fact that when the home care nurses come in and they get in their vehicle to go make calls, they don't have to spend a half an hour scraping the windows off and sweeping.
That's exactly the reason.
Yeah.
That's a good
That's
point.
exactly the reason.
You'll save the 25 grand and
I'm
probably.
gonna save my
wages.
I'm gonna save this 25 grand and paying them wages to clean the windows off.
Right.
Well, you keep saying everything I would say. Fred Kiesler, Sonny and Larry seem to understand that, is that, our staff generate funds, unlike most departments don't generate funds. We bill our Medicaid. So if that means one or two visits aren't done, then there's that much revenue we don't generate, that they're out scraping that out. So I think it's a bargain myself for what they have in that. And I am going to say one other thing is that I think the thing is that I don't know if all of you even have been to the building, particularly when it's running, but it's really packed in there at times. It's just like, and the other thing is it's really hard to quantify. Is there services that we're not doing, particularly educational programs, that we just don't do it? We don't have a meeting room, a public meeting room, to have our health educator to do programs or nurses that do things that ultimately we could generate some revenue out of by getting grants for it, but we don't have the space to do that. And so it's hard for me to, it's like proving a negative because we don't have the space, so we can't really show the revenues we could be generating, and it's hard to offset that. But it is pretty packed, and one of the problems is that we have held off the cubicles that the nurses have. We have about 26, I believe, were refurbished when we moved in 18 years ago. And so I don't know how old they really are, but they're probably pushing 25 years old. So but we held off on fixing any of the stuff, thinking, well, we're going to be moving someday. And so consequently, what's happened is that our model has changed, and we do a lot of phone calls and texting our clients now, and the noise factor gets really high for very confidential conversations that we have going in there. And that was one of the things that we've been working with Ray, is that we had these cubicles with higher walls on. We don't really have the ceiling heights for much higher walls, and blocking the ventilation and light and so forth. And so, it is going to exacerbate the situation.
I think it's important that we note that the health department is one department we have that basically pays most of its own costs, and they're able to build their own fund balance. This is a service to people who truly, in many cases, don't have other options. So we need to make sure that we can provide those citizens of ours proper service to us.
And honestly, you got to consider is that many of our clients are children. So they don't really have a vote or a say or call a county commissioner and complain about it. They're not in a situation to do that. And some are very low income and don't really have a lot of resources to be as vocal in the community.
So, Mr. Chairman, items, just to point out, items B, C, and D are all related to a decision, and we're not ready to make a decision yet, so
We're not
don't need
prepared to make
to
a
do
decision.
anything with those.
I guess the only thing I would say, do we want to talk about the other alternatives that are on here? Just because if we're not going to move forward with the alternatives or any of them, there's no sense in them spending any more time about it either. The aluminum doors obviously make sense for $2,000. We're going to gain that more in maintenance.
Right.
You don't strip screws out of hinges, out of aluminum door frames. You don't pull door latches loose and all of those kind of things that you have in wooden door jambs. The metal roof is the other question. We've talked about pros and cons for that. So do we have any sort of consensus amongst commissioners?
I'm fine with the metal roof, and it would be consistent with the building next to it.
Yeah,
Any other comments?
gotta have it.
Jason?
I think we need to see the whole finance option
Oh, yeah.
before we can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave the topic, unless you have another item?
No, I just wanted to make sure we
All right,
covered the
all right.
alternatives. As far as the sidewalk alternative, I wouldn't be prepared to do that, at least in my mind, I wouldn't consider doing that until we see what the road commission's talking about with reconstruction of that roadway. It's foolish for us to put $11,000 for the sidewalks along the side of Lafreniere Road that go from one side of our property line to the other.
All right.
Can I just make one more comment about that carport thing? This isn't just cleaning off the windows, getting the snow off the car. It's just when it's done, then there's piles of snow on each side where the cars were. And then ever so often, we go through this exercise of driving all those cars to the other end of the parking lot so that they can, with a snow scraper, can clean that out. And it's a whole little, frankly, a lot of wasted time moving those around and to get that cleaned out.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask one more question of staff. I want to clarify either a statement or an opinion that was made in this meeting that by borrowing money from the delinquent tax fund will not be seen differently than having cash in our delinquent tax fund by our bonding agencies. Because my concern, Dennis and Dean, and if Bill was here, is as long as I've been here, every year I've been told by the three of you, the first question they come in when we ask for a bond to go out on bonds, and then they rate, is what is your delinquent, do you have a fully funded delinquent tax fund in cash and your fund balances throughout the county in cash, and the aggregate cash creates the very strong financial position statement in the Standard & Poor's write-up. So I would like...
we will get you an opinion on that, but that is we've never said that. They look at the fund balance in the tax delinquent fund. They don't look at the cash, they look at the fund balance. And according to Bill and Dean, the fund balance will not be changed as a result of this borrow. And we'll get that for you in writing next week.
Could you? Because I mean, that's the only covenant I have in borrowing money from the delinquent tax fund is the acceptance by Standard & Poor's in terms of their viewpoint of the liquidity of that fund.
I understand.
Versus the bond rating.
I understand. We'll get that for you next week.
Okay, all right.
Okay, I don't believe we're in any sort of a position to make a recommendation in regard to the letter of intent or the bonding issue or the internal loan at this point. We're going to get the analysis next week, right?
That's correct.
That would be Mike.
I guess Ray, Fred, do you have anything else to add in regard to this building?
No, I appreciate every commissioner's view, the fact that this isn't an easy decision, and I've bounced it around in my head too, and so what we could do, and we really did, in working with Ray, try to be as frugal as possible without going, to put a balance on trying to have lowering costs for cleaning and so forth in the same process with the type of flooring we had. And we really tried not to make it too opulent and still look professional, and I think that he did a good job on that.
Okay.
Fred, have you noticed any loss of Ray's hair through this project?
Well, he told me one day I could just about pull my hair out, and I offered to help. So.
Maybe grayer.
We ought
Thanks,
to
guys.
be watching Dennis and Dean's hair more
I have
than
no hair to
his.
I've offered him.
I've worked off and on with Ray for 10 years, and, his hair seems to not be nearly as gray as mine is, so.
Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks.
Okay, that would bring us to Central Dispatch Radio Infrastructure. Jason's here.
And Jamel's here as well.
Oh, she snuck in. I didn't
No,
see
she's
her.
been there the whole time, they just don't sit together.
I can understand no one wanting to sit with Jamel.
Just don't sit together.
I understand not wanting to sit with Jamel.
Hey,
It's not a problem.
good evening, Jamel Anderson, Grand Traverse 911, and Jason Torrey, Grand Traverse 911. You got your agenda items in the packet, and I'm sure that you all noticed there were some different items in there than simply the simulcast system that we had initially talked about during the budget process. And I'd like to just answer that question as to why those are in there right now. When we removed, at your request, the simulcast project from the budget process and took that out, we kind of looked at a 5-year analysis on where we were with some other equipment and thought if we're going to bring that to your attention, then we'd be doing you a disservice if we didn't bring everything that will need to be addressed in the near future for you to consider, and just to know that that's out there. So simulcast, what is a simulcast system? Basically, it's a wide area communication system that allows information to be relayed quickly and efficiently, as opposed to one of the ways we're doing it now. Why do we need it? Our current infrastructure was built in about 1987. There were areas that lacked coverage, just the way that system was designed, because it was based around Central Tower, which is off of River Road. And so a lot of the fringe areas did not have the coverage for the entire county. And it had to do with the terrain, the shape of the county, and a lot of that equipment is outdated, unsupported, and our vendors are having more trouble finding parts for it. If you look at that slide there, that shows Central Tower in the middle, and then it shows you the green is the coverage from the pages that we get, or the transmissions we get from Central Tower. And you can see down by Carlin, Kingsley, and there's areas that you don't see coverage. Over time, what we did was kind of cobbled it together and add additional paging sites so that people could get notified of the emergencies and respond to the calls. However, because of the way that those were cobbled in and the engineering of the original structure, the paging sites have to be treated separately and independently from the initial tower site, so they have to be paged in addition to, not along with, which...
So Jamel, when I look at this map, where we added the other sites, it looks like we solved the problem up at the tip of the peninsula, but we didn't really do anything down in the southwest and southeast corners of the county.
And as I'm sure Sonny's probably chomping at the bit to, oh, you are too. as he could attest to.
I don't carry one anymore.
I'll just put, as you could attest, there are still some issues, as you can see, over in Long Lake area. So, I think that considering what we've done and the process that we've taken, we've addressed a lot of the problems that we have had. However, in doing it the way that we had to do it, what we're left with is having to do that redundant paging, and I would like you to listen to what that sounds like from our end and from the responders' end. Have that. So you can have a better understanding of it.
Do we have to put the mic down, or will it pick it up?
Central to engine 3, taking tanker 3, water supply 6, 601 and 3A. Responding will be residential fire 11573 Topview Drive, 11573 Topview Drive. Here's on the current road in Hillendale Drive. They fire in the garage. The garage is underneath the main part of the house. They have evacuated. It's going to be a quad 58. Such clearing, T-17. Central repeating, need engine 3, tanker 3, and 3A to respond to 11573 Topview Drive, 11573 Topview Drive, near south of Carnes Road and Hillendale Drive. It's going to be quad 58, heavy fire in the garage. The garage is under the main part of the house. House has been evacuated. Central clear, 1818.
Central, this is 3 and 14 en route to station.
Clear, 3 and 14.
'73 is north of 63.
Central to Station 8, requesting a full station response to 11573 Topview Drive, 11573 Topview Drive, cross of Carnes and Hillendale Drive. It's going to be quad 58 for a fully involved residential fire, structure fire. Central clear, 1837.
So dispatch from Tanker 8.
Tanker 8, go ahead.
Route to that location from Station 3.
Clear and route at 1837.
Central dispatch, Squad 8.
Squad 8, go ahead.
You heading that way from Station 3? Can you tone out 702 for advisement as well?
Clear, will do, thank you. Central 702 for advisement. Have all of 8 heading to 11573 Topview Drive for a structure fire, residential, Central clear, 1838.
Basically, what we have to do is page off Central Tower, and then we have to repeat that, usually Central Tower, off of the pager site that was cobbled in to make sure that that department got coverage. So it's worked, and we've made it work, it's functional. The problems we run into are when we have multiple calls and the dispatch center is very busy, you can see the amount of time that it takes for someone, it doubles their work and it doubles the radio time that they have to use. Instead of just putting out the page, they have to do it more than one time.
That was all one call, right?
Yeah. We've had a lot of fires lately, but, so it's even been more prevalent. So, and as our workload has, and we've gotten more calls over the years, this system that we've put into place, like I said, it's functioning and it works. However, it is not the optimum way of dispatching, and it takes a lot. I mean, when we're paging, nobody can talk to us on that frequency either. And there are actually times when other dispatchers are waiting to put out emergencies, but they can't put their emergency out because the other one's still paging all these other departments for the calls they have. So,
And that's not an unusual call, that's a typical call.
oh, typical.
That's a typical two-station response for fire.
Right, very typical. So,
Want to see it get long, have it be a drowning or marine call where they page for the initial department, they'll page for EMS, they'll page for the dive team, and they'll page for the Marine Division, and it gets at least 2 to 3 times that long. And the people that are trying to check in to tell them they're en route, they can't get through either, because they're trying to talk on the same frequency.
right.
Was that a Leelanau County call?
Williamsburg.
Grand Traverse County.
Grand Traverse?
Whitewater Township.
The simulcast, what a simulcast system does, what basically puts up sites and then engineers them so that the pages can go out and they don't, for lack of a better technical term, they don't crash into each other. The pages don't. That's why we have to do them separately, because it's not engineered. It's a very specific way that it has to be worked out so that you can page off 2 towers that are close by, and the pages will not cancel each other out. They have to work together. So that is what we need the simulcast system for, and what we're looking for it. The fix is just these aren't working as well as they have been over the years. And the other issue that we're facing is the narrow banding. The narrow banding, which we've all talked about that, has to be done by January 1st of 2013, and we're well on the way of addressing that. However, but narrow banding does that. It narrows down the coverage area. The estimation's about 15%. So we're anticipating a 15% reduction in what we already have in coverage. And until that actually happens, I can't tell you exactly, where our coverage areas are going to lapse, but it's just another level of concern that we have with the system.
It's going to increase our holes.
Yes, it will increase the holes. It will decrease the coverage. If we have, a circle this big right now, when the pagers go off, it'll decrease about 15%. That's the estimate. A simulcast system would take care of that, would mitigate the effects of narrow banding and allow us to replace our infrastructure, which is going to have to be done anyway. A lot of these things, and I sat here listening through the health department presentation, and every comment is legitimate, and we all have stuff. I think most of the county departments really try to hold off and make things last and do the best that everybody can. And then it comes down to a point in time where you guys have to make some tough decisions and figuring out how or what we're going to move forward on.
Larry?
Jamel, way back, I don't know how many years ago it was, 6, 7 years ago when I was on Central Dispatch. Could have been longer.
It was long.
There was this big debate about redoing our equipment and our infrastructure, or the state police was promoting the 800 megahertz system throughout the state, and they were in the process back then putting up their towers and those kinds of things. And I know that a number of, like Elk Rapids, Village of Elk Rapids, they use 800 megahertz, those kinds of things. So I guess my question is, looking at this structure versus, has anything changed in the 800 megahertz world since I last sat on Central Dispatch that would allow us to look at 800 megahertz as a way of dispatching versus going into this type of format?
The issue with 800 is
paging.
The paging, and that has not changed.
Can't page on 800.
So regardless of if we went to 800 for radio communication, we still would need the ability to page. And some departments have addressed that in different ways. I was talking to a fire chief downstate a while ago, and they use cell phone, but we don't, our coverage is not the same here as it is in other places for some of those things. So to answer your question, it is not really an option for us to address this problem.
The simulcast system is just like the old LORAN system, is it, where you've got a master station, and that was an old system for locating yourself before GPS. But you had a master station, and the slaves, they all broadcast the same signal at the same time, so that if you're here and you get 3 signals, your receiver could measure where and determine where you were at. That's basically the same thing, right? All the transmitters would be putting out the same exact signal at the same exact time.
Yes, the ones for each department. Obviously, they're not the same pages for each department, but the ones that we have to duplicate would be able to be transmitted at the same time. We would set the tones and then one transmission, rather than setting tones off one tower, saying it, setting tones off another tower, saying that,
But
dispatch.
if you're off of 2 different towers with the same signal, it takes time for the signal to get to this, so that's where you get the interference, right?
I'll just say yes, because I don't know.
It's all synced, it's GPS synchronized, so they engineer it in which, right down to the microsecond, that each tower transmit those particular signals at exactly the same time.
That's where that old LORAN system was. Because those stations were, like, there was one in Minnesota and one, they were all over the place, but they were all operating at the same time as the master station.
Right, and if I can comment on the 800 megahertz thing, just to clarify a few additional details. 75% of the nation is still on VHF analog high band system, which is what we're currently using. And 75% of the nation uses that because of their geographical topography and the wide area that they basically cover. So more of your metropolitan areas are using the cellular networks because they're very reliable and they're a condensed jurisdictional boundary, so to speak. But a county like ours, 400 some square miles, it's not feasible to use the 800 megahertz. Law enforcement certainly could pursue that as an option. However, just the sheriff's department alone would cost about $34,000 a year just to mic these. That's just to be able to use the system. Now, keep in mind, if you were using the 800 megahertz system as a law enforcement officer, you do not have, unless you want to duplicate the equipment in your car, the ability to talk to the fire department. Okay, unless you want to buy a $7,000 portable versus a $700 portable. There's a major discrepancy when you talk about 800 and VHF. So Antrim County, for instance, their law enforcement has gone to, the sheriff's office has gone to 800 megahertz, same with Leelanau County.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is true of them, however, there are other people around the state, they say, I just simply don't want to talk to the fire service. We're law enforcement, we'll deal with law enforcement issues. Well, we have a very cohesive group here, they all work together, they all respond to the same incidents together, and they're all very supportive of staying together on the same system. So to branch off to 800 megahertz, number one, is not currently supported by the sheriff's office or the police department here locally, and it's simply not feasible for the fire service or in any of the EMS services to do.
Jason?
I can't remember if we had this conversation before, but would it not be possible in terms of having everything go out at once? Let me first ask, the receiving radios that respond to the tones, how many channels do they have available to them, typically? 16?
More probably with the new equipment, sure.
And they probably don't use all of the capability that those radios have. And I'm just wondering, would it not be possible, even right now, to almost hobble together a system that doesn't take all this time by simply stepping out at the 5 kilohertz steps with the VHF, which is what we use. As we go out further and having those steps made at those repeated at those steps. I mean, couldn't we do that? And then whatever frequency they pick up first, whatever's priority on their radio, they're going to pick up.
Well, I can tell you what, our licensing is in place to operate on both wideband and the FCC mandated narrowband channels. So we could do that. You could program a portable radio for wideband and narrowband. However, when it comes to your repeaters and your base stations and control stations, you'd have to duplicate. Those are programmed either wideband or narrowband. So essentially, you'd have to duplicate that to get the full effect of how that would impact you later. Do you follow me? The infrastructure.
So right now, we are actually operating then with narrow and...
No. We have the capability, and we're licensed for both. However, until we make the programming changes on our control stations, our base stations, like in our server room and at the central tower site and these remote sites, we will not be transmitting on the narrowband.
Okay. I guess then, my point is, if you broadcast here and it's repeated at, Tower A and then repeated at Tower B, is it necessary to have to pick up the second mic to talk out of Tower C if you've got it set up as a repeater anyway? And that's my question.
They're not set up as repeaters.
But could they be?
No.
We don't have the right equipment.
No. The only way to get what we're going for is to simulcast. I guess maybe I'm not clear in your question, but.
Well, it just seems like a simple repeater system would solve this without a $1.6 million investment. And maybe that's something that the local radio operators...
Well, we run repeaters now, but the problem is you're only broadcasting on one of those. What we want to do is sync them so that they're rebroadcast in all these various parts of the county that currently don't have the coverage from the one repeater. We have to sync all the repeaters together.
How many towers do we operate off of? We have
Central Tower, Mapleton, downtown, this building, if you want to call it a tower, Harris Road, Carlin, Fife Lake, Interlochen, Whitewater.
Yeah.
And those are sites. I'll call them sites. You want
I understand. I understand.
We still using the one in Grant?
Yeah, Carlin. So
that'd be a lot of channels. I'm just trying to.
No,
This is a industry standard. It's something that in public safety communications is pretty standard. And for what we've done and where we've got so far with the multiple towers and multiple paging, it's really amazing that we haven't, had any issues come up because of it, life safety issues.
Well, I think it's important to note, that in 36 years I carried a radio a long time, a lot of hours. But the fact is that it is important that the person that's working in the car with the victim can talk to the deputy that's closing off the traffic, or if you have a problem along the way. Those are important things for us to do. The other thing that we have is because of the rural nature of our community, there was as many calls that I made with people from Benzie County or Leelanau County as there was that I made calls with Grand Traverse County. And when we made the move to high band, and all of them were talking low band, they were on low band, we were all on high band. I tell this story about pumping 1,000 gallons a minute of water up a hill about 1,000 feet through 5 inches of hose to a scene that I couldn't see and I couldn't talk to. That's not a real comfortable feeling, but it was the only way we could do it, is set the engine at the bottom of the hill, and Cedar's mini pumper was up at the top of the hill, and we were dumping tanks in the road and pumping water. That's not safe, if nothing else. It just simply isn't. The communications is important to continue to maintain, and we've put Band-Aids on this system for a long time. We just keep Band-Aiding it together. We're going to get to a point where we're going to have to do something. Hopefully somebody will come up with some money to help us do that. But the fact is, simulcasting is probably coming. I can show you subdivisions in Long Lake Township that I don't care whether it's in the middle of the township. Their pager won't work in there. I can go into houses in Lake of the Pines subdivision right across from Brayton's on North Long Lake Road. I will guarantee you I cannot talk to Central Dispatch from there. Doesn't happen.
Don't have a fire there.
Well, and
Just don't have
that's
anybody
important.
sick there. We're good.
That's an important comment he just made, because we're talking about pager coverage here, and we're using this as an example. But this not only affects page out, it affects our ability to communicate via voice communications to the mobiles, to the portables, not only fire, but also EMS and law enforcement, and their capability to talk back to us. So it's important just not to focus on ability to notify, but it's also the ability to communicate as a whole, and that's all of public safety. Right? Law enforcement has extreme difficulties in Whitewater Township, in Fife Lake, in the same exact areas in which you can't get a page or you can't talk back.
And this has been a 25-year, and this is not a new issue. You know, Central Tower was not, it wasn't designed to cover for that kind of coverage. But we're at a point today where we've got to consider some other options.
Larry?
I would make a motion that we authorize them to issue an RFQ to identify the specific cost and detailed information for our review. I think it's a necessary item that we look at to see exactly how much it's going to cost, and we can make an informed decision that work.
Motion by Fleece, supported by Thomas. Further discussion? Chris, you had your hand up over there.
Yeah, it's been up for a while, but that's okay.
I couldn't get Jason to be quiet.
Honestly, I think this is more important than a health services building. But my question is, where are we going to get the money? That's for our administrator, and I'm sure he's
Yeah, we didn't come here tonight to give you the answer to that question. I wish we had it, but we did feel it was important to get here tonight and get this reintroduced to you and tell you that this step that we're asking you to take tonight to get the RFQ would be the first step, and hopefully we get an RFQ back. We're going to have to spend some money to do that first part of the work. Now, that might help support some grants, but it may not. We may just have to look at, if we decide we're going to take on this whole project, this project's probably big enough to either add to another borrow or to do a borrow on its own. And it kind of depends on where the county board wants to go with this, but I've heard several people comment, we've cobbled this together for 25 years, it's time to, put this where it needs to be. So maybe we'll decide that we're going to go forward and just, bond it and pay it back over several years, and then this is small enough that we could probably manage it through the capital budget if we paid it over 3 to 5 years, but we need to look at that some more. And I think where you're going with this, certainly if we build a health building, that makes it that much harder. Absolutely.
That is where I'm going with this. I will spend money.
No.
Yes. And I support this. I think this is extremely important. I think we can get by with the health services building that we have for a few more years. I think this is much more important. And I support Commissioner Felice's motion.
Rob, do you have a comment? Rob, did you have a comment?
Herb does.
You don't count.
Technically, we can't be doing this kind of thing.
Well, technically, since I read it, I have to read it now because it would be an open meetings violation if I don't read it.
I disagree with that.
No.
There can't be communications going on with cell phones back and forth at the county board and commissioners meeting. That's against the Open Meetings Act. Just leave it alone.
I believe it is.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
I'm not asking you.
Just
I'm
one.
asking Sonny.
Just one.
I want to make sure that you, and it's in the agenda item, but the simulcast was the main thing. Central Tower, the condition of Central Tower would be impacted by any change that we made. There's information there about generators and backup power at the tower sites, and also 2 other components that we are going to have to address, which are our 911 switch and our IP-based radio console. So I just want to make sure that if you have any questions about that, at this point, we're happy to answer them. Or if you just want us to bring back information, which was the intent, we're more than happy to do that. But I just want to make sure you knew that those were in there.
Larry?
Refresh my memory. I mean, it seems as though 7 or 8 years ago, we went out for the same thing. We hired a firm. They came in with a report on how to enhance our system. They gave us figures, and I believe we took it out on a ballot.
We did.
Yes.
Took it out on a ballot.
It was for surcharge increase.
And it was the surcharge thing.
That's correct.
I remember the state police were kind of the adversary part of that in terms of why we weren't hooking up with 800 megahertz, and it kind of went back and forth, and the public, I think, just got to the point where they didn't know exactly what would be the best way to go, so they just voted it down. So I guess my question is, has the situation changed in terms of the recommendations from the original RFQ? I know technology probably has changed, but is there the capability of using surcharge money to help pay off the obligation still available?
I can comment on the consultants. That was a 2002 study done by RCC.
Okay, that's a promulgation study to begin with.
Yeah, and they went through a whole gamut of things, including radio communications upgrades.
Right.
But in addition, they said we needed MBTs and ABL and upgraded CAD and et cetera, et cetera. The only thing in that whole recommendation that we have yet to complete is this project right here.
Okay.
And their recommendation was a 5 to 6 site simulcast standalone 800 megahertz system. They also gave options for high band VHF simulcast system. The difference in cost was between about $10 million for a standalone 800 opposed to $1.5 to $2 million for VHF analog. So they recommended, they pushed for 800 megahertz for whatever reason.
Right.
However, the local emergency services folks are all standing their ground on the stance to stay with the VHF analog.
The important thing to also note, I guess, I want to give them the credit that's due, as Jason said, all the other recommendations made by RCC have been implemented, and we haven't, I don't even think we've seen a capital improvement request. Some of this came through Homeland Security.
Some you just don't want to know.
We've done with the CAD and all of that, you guys did. I mean, we've done a lot of that.
Okay.
I mean, really a lot of that work, and this is the last piece, really.
Can a surcharge help pay for this?
We would have, the 911 funding is a mess kind of in Lansing right now. The legislation that was written a couple years ago will be sunsetting soon, but basically, it's a possibility, but in order to raise our surcharge, we'd have to go out to a vote.
Okay.
And that was done in 2003, shortly after that study was done.
Okay.
Right, and
That's
one
what
thing there was this big promise about that 800 system at that point, that the Michigan State Police was going to build this system. And the bottom line is they never built all of the system that they promised the people they were going to do. And that's why, you can talk to state troopers in this area, they'll tell you they have better opportunity to talk to Lansing than to do to some of the places down the road a half a mile. All right, let's vote. Any further comments? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, this should bring us to
Commissioner Henschel.
No, Henschel.
Commissioner Henschel's comments in regard to community mental health.
We had a meeting.
How did that go for you?
How'd that go?
We had a good discussion with our administrator, and even Dickie stopped in, and Larry was there, and our jail administrator,
Bob Hall.
and our undersheriff. You were there, right? Yeah. A lot of discussion, different options, what we can do as a board. I think we talked about everything from running our own mental health system to holding back part of our payment to pay for mental health services they're contracted to provide and aren't. The jail administrator has a meeting with the 6 county jail administrators together with a representative of Northern Lakes Community Mental Health, Greg Paffhouse, who's the CEO. That's coming up later this month. And I think our feeling or consensus was see if they can't just work something out before our board has to figure out what we're going to do. So that's where it's at.
Right. That's a good consensus.
I obviously wasn't there, but one of the things that I've discovered over the past, there's no consensus about what mental health services are being provided in the 6 county jails.
There's no consistency.
No consistency.
And I think Commissioner Henschel, brought that forth, that from Greg Paffhouse, that it's different depending on the need in each of the facilities. One of the things we are trying to do, though, is we're trying to establish a baseline of services that corresponds with the contracts that we had to kind of see what level of service we were getting from mental health when the contracts were set forth in 98 and 2001. 97, thank you.
Okay. Further questions in this regard? Comments? Thank you, Rob.
Thanks.
That brings us to the CPO update. The sheriff doing this, the undersheriff doing this?
I guess we weren't kidding leaving you dead last. We didn't think it'd take this long.
At this point, it's okay.
Dinner's overrated anyway.
Nate Elger, Sheriff's Office. Thank you very much for taking us on short notice. Yesterday, because we've had discussions with this board about the CPO contracts, we met with the township supervisors for the townships that have law enforcement officers through agreement. And it was a good meeting. They called it, actually. They've had their own meeting as well to discuss some concerns they've had shared. Fred Jules was here this evening. I think he had to leave due to the length of the meeting. But long and short of their meeting, they don't like the 3% annual increase. That's the first thing out of the gate for them. And I'm sorry, Larry was there as well. Yeah. So they don't want the 3% annual increase. And going very briefly backwards, since 2002, the Sheriff's Department has talked to the finance director and the county administrator and has sent out a letter to the township saying, we're going to increase your contribution by 3% this year to cover wages, fringes, things of that nature. The contracts don't say that. The contracts say you'll pay for the wages and fringes of the officer. We have pinned a 3-year deputy just as a mechanism of payment. So we reached out there, grabbed a 3-year deputy wages and fringes and said to the townships, this is the payment you're going to give us for these services, and we're going to increase them annually by 3%. So over the years, what has happened is the township's payments have increased at a 3%, and the cost of the officers not always has increased 3%. Sometimes the officer gets a 3% raise, sometimes they get a 1.5% raise, and more often than not, recently, those numbers are significantly less.
Okay, question. You're saying sometimes the cost doesn't increase 3%, but when you figure in the cost of benefits, I think it goes over 3%.
It would certainly depend on the benefits and the other costs associated with providing the service. Increase in cost of vehicles, gas.
But we take on gas and vehicles.
Sorry?
And so the county's expense continues to increase, I think, at a more rapid rate.
It actually doesn't. It's remained fairly constant, and it's about an 80-20% split is what it boils out to be. That the townships pay about 80% of the officer, and the county pays about 20% of that. When I say the increases don't always make 3%, what I mean by that is the deputies' wage increases over the last several years have not hit a 3% increase.
That's true.
And this year, the health insurance cost has actually decreased.
Yeah, but that's just 1 year. I guess, Nate, what I'm looking for is, do you have some kind of breakdown that will tell me, how much our vehicle costs have increased, our fuel costs have increased, our benefit costs have increased, et cetera, so that we can weigh everything versus what the townships are paying? I'm not asking the townships to pay an unfair share. I'm just asking for a fair share.
Sure.
And I just want to see that it's a fair share.
And that's exactly what they're asking. They are not opposed to their contribution. They believe in this program strongly. They want to have a fair increase annually. And from their perspective, they see the times today being, they're not getting raises. Their employees aren't getting raises. And we're saying to them, you have to pay 3% increase to accommodate wage increases, when anybody can go online and see the deputies didn't get a 3% increase. So there was an education piece of this to say it's not just the wage and fringe increases, it's also everything else that goes with it.
But it's important to realize that the basic agreement is they take care of wages and fringe and a little overtime, and we take care of vehicles and equipment and everything else.
And fuel.
That's right.
That's right.
And, I mean, that hasn't gone down.
No, it has
What I'm
not.
saying is the base agreement that has always been there is they're responsible for employee and associated expense. We've taken responsibility for equipment and associated expense. So under that, I'm not saying it's correct, but under that scenario,
Okay.
they're not worried about, I mean, they're worried, of course, but they don't, if fuel goes up 20%, that's
They
our
are.
responsibility, that's not theirs. That's kind of the way it's been for...
Since
as long as it's-
1992.
Since 1992.
Well, basically, these things have been in place for, some of them for 15, 16 years.
Certainly.
You know, one of the key factors, you know, in my mind, is the fact these contracts were drawn on 3-year officers. We don't have very many 3-year officers anymore.
The contract was not drawn on a 3-year officer.
That's
That
just the
goes
way
back,
we've
the
always-
contracts are for the officer. That's what the language states.
Okay.
The concept...
We set the fees on a 3-year
That was back in 2002, then under Sheriff Monroe, and I'm assuming Mr. Bott and Mr. Childs made this arrangement of how are we going to establish paying for these officers? And the issue is not specific to any given township with the exception of Garfield. Garfield has officers that rotate in and out of Garfield Township on a quarterly basis. It'd be a nightmare financially for the accounting department to say, this guy was here for 4 months and this guy was here for 4 months, and it's not there. It's just too difficult. The townships, there's, what do we say, have an average of 8 years experience is what the officers are in the townships right now. The 3-year deputy was just a mechanism of payment, and it shouldn't go much farther than this. So what we agreed to with the townships, at least conceptually, is we'll get rid of that language. We won't even talk about that anymore. We'll talk about the cost of services for supplemental law enforcement, and what does that cost? And annually increase that for the townships based on wages and fringes of the officer, actual increases, and try to come up with an actual increase in the cost of services, gas, oil, grease, changing cost of vehicles, and somehow provide that to them annually to have a more fair increase to the township. I can tell you right now that the cost, if we froze the 2012 payment for the township officers at $74,161, we are within $200 to $300 of actualizing cost that we are expending for the officers in the existing positions. So we're almost at a zero barrier. We're almost even. So it's our recommendation at this point to consider freezing that rate for 2012 and for 2013 coming into this conversation about what is an actual increase.
Now, there's one caveat to that, without making this too complicated. That average that we talk about, which I agree with, that does not take into account the few officers we have that are still on the defined benefit plan.
That's correct.
And it's important to understand that, because one officer, the defined benefit might be $60,000 a year, because there's so few officers on defined benefit. And if we start charging for those specific officers, what are you going to hear next? The township's going to say, don't want them.
Yeah, don't say no.
No, give me a one-year officer, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
And so what you're going to have is, those officers are going to be all under the county anyway, so you can't, we talked about how we need to pull that out of the regular budget and separate that extra cost.
Right.
So we kind of agreed, I think, that we were pulling that extra cost out of this and using the average. So understand, that's been pulled out, that's important to note. But we have less of them as time goes on. Everybody's really on DC now. All the 8-year officers are on DC.
Probably if you took all of our officers top to bottom, that 8, 9, 10 years is probably the average anyway.
Certainly.
We're certainly there now.
Yeah.
And at least for 10 years, we've been on DC. So no officer has gone to DB.
Our interests in this are they're selfish. We're in the middle of this agreement. It's a 3-way agreement, and we're in the middle, but we definitely are the beneficiaries of this relationship.
A 3-year agreement. Is that what you meant?
No, I'm talking about the agreement between the townships and the county on supplemental law enforcement. So
Okay.
we want to have a mechanism that is fair, so the townships don't say this is an unfair cost, we don't want to participate any longer, because that would affect our ability to provide law enforcement services. So the proposition we're making, or wishing that you consider, is this: the freezing of the payments at $74,161 for 2012, and then increasing with actual cost estimates as best as we can come up with.
See, now, we haven't talked about this, Nate, but, I think that makes sense, because I know that, we're in the middle of this, Larry was there, that we're in the middle of this discussion with the townships, and they're kind of really edgy about kind of where this program is going to go. But I guess then what I'd say is, maybe we should look at other formulas in 2013. Maybe we look at the total cost of the officer, including the fuel, including everything, and maybe just arrange a percentage cost and then base it on actual.
I agree completely. In fact, I would encourage you to consider keeping it an 80-20 split, so that any increase in cost would be split evenly to maintain the relationship as is.
Yeah, that makes some sense. And maybe we base it on the prior year, so that we can talk actual dollars instead of talking hypotheticals.
Certainly.
What's going to happen with the cost of gasoline and those things.
Well, number one, on the issue of defined benefits, the township certainly didn't even have a say in that, so I think what Dennis said is correct. We need to put that on the shelf on the side, and we worry about that. And Nate, it's the recommendation of the sheriff and yourself to freeze the present level, the $74,161 for the calendar year 2012, and then negotiate the 2013, whatever it is.
Yes.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman, that we allow the Sheriff's Department to freeze that rate at $74,161 for the calendar year 2012.
Motion, do I have a second? Commissioner Gilman, second.
May I just make a couple more statements about the meeting prior to, they also wished to discuss the freezing a fixed rate, correct, Mr. Inman, for 3 years.
3 years.
That is something that you'll want to consider potentially in future meetings, and also this is a draft contract. We have yet to come up with a finalized version of the contract, and I would encourage the discussion about if any of this language that is discussed and agreed upon, that language has to be in the contract so that we can keep it in terms of historical record of how these proceedings are to occur.
Dennis, I'm sorry. Do we have in place a contract with the deputies that takes us through 2014?
Yes, we do.
Yes. So we realistically could look at this contract with the wage increases that are in 2013 and 2014 that we've already negotiated. We have a fixed cost for wages.
Yeah,
We
just
don't have a
wages.
fixed cost for benefits.
We don't have a fixed cost for benefits, and I do think that if you agree to do this one-year freeze, I really do think, since the townships are so interested in actual costs, I think we should relook at the whole system, as I suggested earlier. Let's look at what the cost of the vehicles are and the fuel. And if we can simplify and just go 80-20 or whatever is appropriate, boy, we're talking actual dollars, and then it's very easy. And then, you don't have to be concerned that gasoline goes up 40%. If gasoline goes up 40%, we share that with the townships. We're not taking it all ourselves. So I think we're better to just do the 1 year.
I think I need to make a disclosure here, and that is, previous to this meeting, I was at a meeting with the G5 and other township people that have community policing officers, and they came up to me and they said, "Is this on the agenda tonight?" And I called the administration office and they said no, and I said, "Well, we certainly could add it to the agenda." And then they said, "Are we going to make a decision tonight?" And then I called the sheriff, and the sheriff said, "Our intent is to come in and make a updated report on our discussions with the township, And if we can get some sort of direction, that would be fine, and that's what we would be looking for tonight. And then then they would go back to the townships, finalize their discussion, and then come back with the formal approval to the Board of Commissioners. So, and then they said to me, Dennis, if you aren't going to approve it tonight or get into discussion about approvals, then we won't attend the meeting.
Well, but all right, so I
just want to make sure, I want to make sure that we're fair in my disclosure to the townships, that representatives that were considering attending the meeting to have this discussion with Nate and the sheriff regarding these discussions. They said they weren't, since we weren't going to make a motion or a discussion or approval on it.
I think what you're doing is you're giving direction to
I just want to
the
clarify.
sheriff
I want to clarify
to go
the
back
motion.
and negotiate this with the townships.
That's all I'm asking for, is the clarification of the motion, so,
The contracts would have to come back for approval.
I'm not, tomorrow morning, slapped all over the face, for saying, well, you said that, that you guys weren't going to do anything last night, and it was just going to be an updated report.
And I just
But I understood the undersheriff to say that's what the townships wanted for
Well, they
calendar year
wanted
2012.
they wanted a number of things. That was just one item.
Which is our position, that we should consider freezing those wage increases. The townships want to have a fixed flat rate for 3 years. That is something that they chose. And just to clarify as well, we did tell the township supervisors we were coming here tonight, but it was late notice and Chris Kramer could not get us on the agenda, so just as a...
Was it, this contract is calendar year?
The contract has been ongoing since 19...
No, I understand that, but the one we're talking about, 2012, that's the calendar year, correct?
Yes, it is.
It's November 2nd already. I don't think the townships are going to object, and if they do, we can talk about it more, but I don't think they'll object to a freeze.
No, they won't, but there were other issues they wanted to talk about with regard to discussions about the contract, and...
You mean the 3 years?
And there were other issues that were brought up as well.
Well, I think the point of this is
if you want to just kind of rephrase the motion that, conceptually you move forward with what you think are the main base recommendations you can live with, that's fine, but...
Well, I believe our responsibility in regard to this issue is the fiscal. And if we set the number of dollars we're asking those townships to do, anything in regard to other issues that would be negotiated in the contract, the undersheriff and the sheriff can go back and negotiate those contracts, and then they'll bring it to us. What we need to do is split the price tag on it. The price tag, according to the motion, is $74,161 per officer. And then I assume the lieutenant is increased from that, and the detective.
I just want to make it clear that I disclosed as the chairman of the county commission, based on the conversation with the sheriff, that we were not going to approve any of the consideration. You were looking for general direction, and that's why the township supervisors did not come to this meeting. No, they told me flat out, if you're not going to make a decision tonight on these contracts, we're not coming to the meeting. If you're going to make a presentation on the update of our meeting and give us general direction, that's fine. And then you can come back with us, work with it, and then come back to the county board and do the final approval. That's what I disclosed to them based on the conversation I had with the sheriff. So, I don't want all these township supervisors calling me up tomorrow morning and said, Commissioner Inman, Chairman, you said this, and the sheriff said this, and therefore we would have been available at that meeting.
Commissioner Inman, I think we're giving the sheriff's department guidance like
I just want to
Chairman
clarify,
Wheelock said
the
about
motion.
the 74,161, and I am positive that the sheriff, knowing him well, and the undersheriff will be right back here if there's a problem with the townships and the freeze for 2012.
Yeah.
And if they are, we'll rediscuss it.
Yeah, I'm just saying that, the freeze is fine. I'm fine with that motion, but, the other issues that were on the table in terms of the discussion that, we just give them general direction to go back and negotiate what you think is the fairest thing to do and bring back the final product.
The intent here today was to give you a verbal update regarding the meeting we had with the township supervisors as requested by this board.
Right.
if that's what you're saying.
Yes, Mr. Undersheriff, my question is, do you want a motion to the fact that we support the salary freeze?
I didn't ask for that, but
I mean, that could
that
be
is
one
our
component.
position, and we have told the townships that is our position. We told them that yesterday. I did not hear one township supervisor balk at that.
Right.
They wanted to have a fixed 3-year rate, and we said we would have to discuss that with you. But it is our position at this point that the wages are at basically .0 and they are frozen. They're right there. We should consider freezing the rate for 2012.
Rob?
I'd like to see something in paper as far as the cost analysis of doing this versus the other options before I vote on it.
Chris?
Well, I would agree with Commissioner Henschel. While I'm absolutely aware that we cannot provide the level of service that we provide to Grand Traverse County without the townships, I mean, it has to be a partnership. I do believe the supervisors are looking for a fair partnership, as we are. The only thing that I would ask is that we keep talking about the townships. We offer this to the townships, we need to offer it to the city as well.
We've had preliminary discussions about that.
I understand that, I'm just saying, I just want it understood that, I mean, the city doesn't have to take us up on it, and clearly they have not to date. But I don't want to exclude the city or the villages in the option. That's all.
All right.
Could we clarify the motion on the floor?
The clerk will read the motion.
Or Larry would like to repeat it, that you...
I can say what I think it is.
All right. You know,
A 1-year freeze at the present rate of $74,161 per officer for the year 2012, and negotiate the rates for 2013.
Correct. Rob?
Is this a board action or a committee action?
Committee action.
Committee action.
So the committee is recommending to the board at the end of the month?
Right.
So they would have an opportunity to come back at the end of the month
Request.
to talk about it.
Okay. And is it possible that we can get some kind of financial figures on paper by that time?
Yes.
There you go.
Well, you know, Rob, if you can't trust the sheriff and the undersheriff, and I will guarantee you one thing about our sheriff in Grand Traverse County. If anybody knows where the nickel is, he does. And I'm sure he's teaching his undersheriff the same.
Okay.
I just want to make it clear that I had a discussion with the township supervisors. and
Well,
they-
you made a
they knew
mistake, yet
We were going to have a motion on the floor.
We're a little
Or
premature.
discuss the contract to this extent, then they would have been here at this meeting. So, you know, I apologize to them in public, you know, if they have an issue with...
All right, we have a motion on the floor in a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, the same. Motion carries. Do you have anything else for us, Mr. Undersheriff?
All right.
Mr. Sheriff, are you all set? Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, that's the end of unfinished business. We had no new business to come before us. Second opportunity for public comment.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to offer some public comment out of my seat, where I think would be more appropriate. So,
You're fine, whatever.
okay right here?
You're fine right there.
Okay. You know, there is an ongoing issue going on. The city has a particular ordinance that's being voted on, and I'd like to make some commentary.
I put him out there if he's going to talk about this, please.
I'm willing to.
Okay.
He was willing to, let him do it out there.
Those chairs are a lot more comfortable. Early this year, and during an orientation, I asked the director of the health department if the incidence of AIDS is still higher in the homosexual community than in the general population. He said, yes, it is. This spawned a 5-minute discussion in which I offered my own opinion on homosexuality and related a personal story of when I was a child. In the month or so that followed, This confidential conferencing became not only news, but grew into a desire to remove me from my job as a commissioner for having an opinion about which even the Record Eagle calls a lifestyle choice as recently as a week ago when it endorsed Traverse City's Proposition 1. For simply speaking my mind in a private conversation, that same paper identified me as a bigot, was joined by a few activists, and had backup with concurring opinion of a fellow commissioner and his wife as well. Those folks on this board and in our community who have families and businesses should be chilled to the bone, considering what happens when such censorship and thought control efforts are buttressed by actual legislation. What happens when the vocal and printed objection to what any of us might say or feel is enforceable through the hammer of government, I ask. We lose our ability to speak out. We risk surprise lawsuits or ordinance enforcement if someone has a beef either related or unrelated to discrimination. It becomes a tool of those who would mute dissent. I pray Traverse City voters decide to vote no on this ordinance. It is destructive, divisive, and reveals even more so the ugly face of political correctness. Thank you.
My turn. I will address the first part of your comments, which were that you seem to think that if anyone disagrees with you publicly, they're trying to censor you, when actually they're just disagreeing with you. And they may use harsh words, but then you use harsh words when you disagree with people, Commissioner Gilman, so you shouldn't be surprised at that. As far as the ordinance itself, the ordinance is one that prohibits discrimination in housing, in employment, and in public accommodation based on sexual orientation, and extends that protection, which shouldn't have to be extended. I mean, it ought to be automatic, but it isn't automatic because some people choose to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. So the ordinance, which was passed a year ago unanimously by the City Commission, prohibits discrimination, again, in housing. It prohibits discrimination in public accommodation and in employment based on sexual orientation. A yes vote keeps the non-discrimination ordinance, and I would urge all of Traverse City to vote yes on this ordinance. And I understand there have been some objections by some religious groups, and I would point out that the ordinance has exemptions for religious groups, and it also has exemptions for people who are renting, for instance, renting rooms in their own homes. If you're renting a room in your own home, the ordinance does not apply to you. If you're renting an apartment building, it does. So again, I would urge citizens of Traverse City to vote yes on November 8th. Thank you.
Any other public comment to be taken at this time? Seeing none, we'll move forward. County Commissioner reports. Chris?
What I'm about to report, I've already spoken with Commissioner Wheelock on, to let him know ahead of time, and what I'm going to report is basically more for the, I'm going to give a little background, more for the public than for the county board, because you've already heard this. Several months ago, the Parks Director reported to the Parks Department, the Parks Commission, that we were banning the public, we were closing Twin Lakes Park for day campers because it was state law. And so I asked to see the state law, and it was not state law. We were simply closing the park to the public at Twin Lakes when we had day campers there, and overnight campers, simply because it's one of the things that we've always done. Mr. Cooney, our legal counsel, confirmed that we were doing this simply because we've always done it that way. It's not state law. And he was kind enough to come in front of the Parks Commission and say, this really is a policy decision. And the Parks Board, at their last meeting, did make a policy decision, and the Twin Lakes Park will continue to be closed to the public when we have overnight campers and day campers there. I just want the public to know that I did vote against this and why I voted against it. First of all, there is no other public park in the state of Michigan that I can find that does this. We have day campers at the Civic Center. We don't close the Civic Center to the public simply because we have day campers there. We have 8 weeks of swimming in a lake in the summertime, and I'm probably the only one of the few steady swimmers on the county board, and I swim regularly in West Bay. I go out to Twin Lakes. My nieces grew up in Long Lake Township in Twin Lakes. We're closing the park, in effect, 2 weeks out of the 8, because it works out to be 12 days. But we're closing not just the little section of beach, we're closing the whole park. That was the motion, to close the entire park. We put up a yellow sawhorse. I can see Commissioner Wheelock's eyes rolling back. I will be briefer. I'll be quick. We put up a yellow sawhorse that says, it's a yellow sawhorse that says closed to the public, and you know who that keeps out? It keeps out the families with their children. That's who it keeps out. Somebody that wants to go in there and have a party or break the law, they're going to still do that. I think it actually decreases the safety of the children who are at that park by doing this. So I just wanted the public to know, I did vote against this. However, the Parks Board voted in favor of it. And I want to let the county board know that policy has now been enacted. And I object. But I'm in the minority occasionally. Thank you.
Well, I guess I have to respond just a little bit along the edge, because Chris is right. She called me and asked for my opinion and asked how I felt about this. And I guess I probably have spent more time in Twin Lakes than most of the rest of our community over the long time that I've been alive out there. One thing, there's a difference at Twin Lakes when you're having day camp there and you're doing events in and out and around than there is when we have day camp in Howe Arena. We don't allow the public to walk through Howe Arena while we have groups of people there, but yes, we do allow the Civic Center to remain open. I have on multiple occasions hosted soccer camps there for high school teams and college teams. And on a couple occasions, I have simply asked the caretaker to barricade the driveway because the traffic coming in and out was so bad that it was a problem. And there were times that I actually asked the sheriff's department to make routes through there. I remember one night specifically, I had a team of college girls here. I had 18, 21 college girls here. And all of a sudden a car come in at 10 o'clock at night with 3 young guys in it. I could find the car, but I didn't know where the girls went or where the guys went. That's not a very safe feeling either. I am responsible for these. I am hosting this camp here, and I have no way of controlling this. I actually had the sheriff's department come and find where they were, because it simply wasn't an issue. It's not a matter of whether it's a public park at that point. It's a matter of, are the people that are paying for this park and using this park, are they being put at risk because we're allowing other people to come in? One of the discussions that's always happened when we've had kids camps there is the fact that we needed to be able to control who was coming in and out, because if some kid came up missing, who's going to be responsible? We are. And it was a security issue more than anything else. And for the number of people that use Twin Lakes Park for a public beach, I believe they all are comfortable when it is barricaded. I hear very, 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 very few complaints about that. and I'm just down the road. And I'm sure that if there were people that were offended by the fact that it was closed, I would have heard about it over the last 20 years that I've been involved between the town, or 30 years between the township and here. And I've heard no complaints in that regard. Never. Not one time. And even more importantly than that, is the Parks and Recreation Commission took up this issue, had a discussion, did their investigation, and determined they wanted to maintain the rule. And I don't believe it is this county board's position or within their purview to override that decision. Chris?
Commissioner Wheelock, I wasn't suggesting that the county board override their decision. I was reporting it and stating that I disagree with it. And I thank you for making my point in the fact that families are abiding by the barricade and young teenage boys are not necessarily. I was not suggesting that we overturn the decision. I was just stating what it was and that I disagree with it. Thank you.
Further reports by commissioners? Larry?
Well, I have a comment on closing public parks or public lands, whether they're a county park, a city park, for the specific use of other individuals. Those parks, in my opinion, belong to everybody and everybody, and for one small group of people to be able to close a park like Commissioner Maxbauer was talking about, I think that's radically wrong as a citizen. I think it probably does anger a lot of citizens, but they just don't voice their opinions. And my recommendation, my personal recommendation to the County Parks Commission would be to please reconsider their policy. And I think perhaps if this continues down the road, what happens if we have other groups come and say, well, I'd like to close Maple Bay because we're having a shindig out there. I can see where this could lead to where a lot of the parks could be closed. It hasn't in the past, but then again, things that happened 30 and 40 years ago happen on great frequency today, and it kind of snowballs, and it's almost impossible to stop. I'm absolutely not in favor of any group utilizing any public park for any reason and being allowed to close it. I don't mind a group using the park, but the park should remain open to the general public also. Thank you.
Jason?
I concur.
Other comments?
I kind of make a comment under Commissioner reports. One of the ad hoc committees we currently have set up is for appointments to the various committees and boards that this board appoints. And, I want to make a point, looking through this, just one of the three committees, the packet. Airport Commission, we have no additional applicants who have expressed an interest in the Airport Commission, recommend reappoint incumbents. Northern Michigan Substance Abuse Services Council, NMSAS. We have no additional applicants for this vacancy, recommend reappoint incumbent. Beta Board, we have received no additional applicants for this vacancy, reappoint incumbent. Something wrong with, Veterans Affairs Committee, we have no additional applicants, reappoint incumbents. Something's wrong with our message to the public about the opportunity to take part in the public process. And I don't know the solution, but I want to point out there's a problem when, and I don't think it's that people don't care. I think it's that people don't understand the opportunity. Maybe they're just not getting the message. Maybe we don't understand this, but not many people read the Record Eagle. I mean, I know it's our only major newspaper in the area, but I'm amazed at the number of people that tell me, I never read that. Maybe we need to look for a better route, and maybe it's just simply announcing it at these meetings. We have these boards, and just mention it a few times.
Dick, did you have a comment?
Unfortunately, Rob, I remember way back when I was at Green Lake Township, I had the job of finding people for the Planning Commission and the Board of Appeals and the Board of Review and this and that, and my saying was always that anytime I could rope them and drag them in, they'd volunteer. It's very hard to get people to volunteer, because for one thing, they don't like to have to put up with what they have to put up with sometimes. And I don't blame them for being quiet to the issue. But it's always tough to get people.
Jason?
Dennis, who handles do we do press releases?
Sure.
We do ads in the paper.
Not ads.
No, we
Press
don't do
releases.
press releases.
I'd be willing to, if you'd like, I'd be willing to write up, if you had information that you'd like to get out, that it would be an ad such as this, I'd be willing to do some copy work for press releases, simply because I think when you get out that information, and Commissioner Henschel is right. I mean, if people aren't reading the paper, they're not getting the opportunity to see when these positions are open. And perhaps even having an additional radio spot, by way of news. Hey, the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners is seeking a person to fill this position. I mean, once upon a time, I think that was news, wasn't it?
Larry?
There was a time you could pick up the paper and read the legal notices, which I still do. But something really caught my attention the other day. Garfield Township, our largest township in the county, and it was a notice that they had put in there regarding a meeting they just had held, a regular scheduled monthly meeting, and it was a synopsis of the meeting. The synopsis appears on our website if you wish to view it.
The full minutes appear. The full thing appears in their
On our
website.
And consequently, they're not publishing it, and I just wonder, we need to talk to our legislature to get this antiquated law of a daily newspaper, so it can be put several places, and I agree with that, because the younger people, they don't look at newspapers at all. They're looking at the computer and websites and this and that. I think this board, perhaps in the future, should do a resolution and send it to our legislatures down in Lansing, suggesting that we change that law.
Let us not forget, when the townships or the county choose to put an article like that in the newspaper, we pay for it by the column inch.
Oh, yeah.
And it gets very, very expensive.
It is.
We have that issue when we talk about ordinances and those kind of things. We're required by law to publish those in a paper of circulation.
And that's exactly...
And it's a huge cost, and there's nothing we're going to get to do about that in the next couple of weeks, I'm sure. Larry?
Dennis, we really didn't give you an opportunity to complete your report on how we get the news out about appointments. And I know and I haven't checked here recently, but I know in the past, administration has not only put an ad in the newspaper, they sent notices to all the townships. We had it on our, back then if we had some sort of a website, we had it on our website. When county commissioners went out to their townships in the city, that was part of our county commissioner report, is that we had particular openings, and anybody in our area that was interested, please apply at administration. And I believe we were sending notices to the Chamber of Commerce. We were faxing over or emailing vacancies that we had available to the Chamber of Commerce. And we had what I thought was a fairly decent outreach program for appointments. And I just wonder if we're doing that or not doing that, or what
We still
have
do
going
that.
on. Okay.
We've also done press releases in the past, but we found that very seldom would anybody do anything with the press releases. I've spoken to the Leadership Grand Traverse people and the young business professionals groups, and gone to them and shown them the positions that are available and encouraged them to apply. We've done a whole variety of things that to encourage people to apply. Is there more that we could do? Absolutely, but this has been an historic problem, and I don't think it's just been a problem in the county, but it's been an issue, trying to find people to do this, but any suggestions are welcome, and would be encouraged. We'll do anything we can. It's been a very difficult thing to get the word out and to get people interested. Oh, and as you said, it is on our website. We put it on our website. And it's available. I was thinking, Commissioner Henschel, that might be another thing. If any of you are in service clubs, that's always a great place to go, and, we could do up an ad, or a little announcement, and if you could put it on the tables at service clubs, if any of you are in service clubs or community groups, that would be a great way to get it out too. And of course, we encourage commissioners, if they know people that are interested, to invite them to come make application, because we do need more. We did have a period there, some of you will remember, we had a period of about 2 or 3 years there, we'd have 6 or 8 people for every position, and then it just kind of died off again. It
I
seems.
think it's part of it is the economic times and people's, they've got enough challenges managing their family and their financial affairs, and, to get more involved into something else right now is kind of difficult for them to do.
Well, plus, there are certain boards that have more,
Appeal?
thank you, that do have more appeal to the general public. And I mean, some of these boards, people just aren't real interested in being part of. So, it's a matter of that as well, so.
Do we have any other commissioner reports this evening?
Nope.
Seeing none, then let's move forward to announcements. The only thing I'd like to mention, the Michigan Townships Association and the Planning Department has their annual awards dinner tomorrow evening.
Yep, I'll be there.
For those of you that may have registered, just a reminder. Any others?
How many commissioners, for curiosity's sake, will be attending that tomorrow night?
Tomorrow?
Tomorrow night.
You went last year, didn't you?
I've been every year for 33 years, and I'm not going tomorrow.
You're not driving all the way to Williamsburg?
I'm having my wisdom teeth reinserted.
That's one of the reasons.
Okay. No other announcements? No purpose for a closed session?
Motion to adjourn,
To adjourn?
Mr. Chairman. Motion.
All in favor, we're gone.
Yeehaw!